We think Australians should take a moment to reflect on how exactly we let a Father's Day demonstration for Palestine turn into the now disgraceful Sunday Brawl at Bondi.
This country's endless beaches are where we go to leave our troubles behind.
In another fraying of social cohesion,
the Israel and Palestine conflict came to Bondi Beach this morning.
The Jewish community and pro-Palestine protesters have violently clashed.
It all started on Father's Day, Sunday, November 7th, when a
group called Jews Against the Occupation organised a paddle out on surfboards at Bondi Beach against Israel's military actions in Gaza.
We're here to mark Father's Day for the tens of thousands of Palestinian fathers and the tens of thousands of Palestinian children who do not have a father.
But not everyone agreed and took special exception to the location, which they felt must have been about them.
Intentionally provocative to go to Bondi Beach.
Highly provocative. It's completely unnecessary.
This was a provocative move.
So an organization called Stand With Us sent out a note on Thursday the 4th, 3 days before the planned protest, proclaiming,
"No, not in our backyard. Plans for an opposing Jewish action."
And that call-out was echoed by the Australian Jewish Association and, according to the organizer, by a Krav Maga fight club called Lions of Zion, which called residents and other people besides to come out and, it's fair to say, confront the protesters.
Provoking a response from the Jewish community in their backyard, trying to bring hatred and antisemitism to Australia.
Now, their message says it's not, quote, a call for a protest nor for confrontation. It's a call to stand against hate. However, they also make pretty clear that they aren't talking about hate in the abstract. No one's being called down to the beach to sing Kumbaya and hold hands. In this case, hate, as they describe it, has a very real manifestation. It's not Hamas, it's not Nazism, it's fellow Australians protesting the war in Gaza on the beach and in the surf.
They've got the whole suburb of Bondi on edge. Everyone's nervous.
Star of David around my neck. Hey, man, I feel like Judah Maccabee. Man, I feel like Judah Maccabee.
That's who is to be the object of their confronting.
Everyone's nervous.
Why is everyone nervous, you might ask? Is the IRGC coming? Or is it because the AJA told them they should be? As they did before both the Purgatory protests in Caulfield, which turned violent, as well as the Caulfield Shul protests, which also turned violent. One common element across all these is an alarming message from the Australian Jewish Association telling people to be afraid of protesters.
We are absolutely peaceful. We are totally committed to this being a lovely family event.
We know many of these people are troublemakers. They're coming from outside the area. Who knows what their intentions are?
Well, the organizers have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and made no secret about what the protest was about. Just as they did before the last controversial protest called by Jews against the occupation, last December at Sydney's Great Synagogue. Which you probably know as one of the supposed assaults on places of worship which infuriated so many of us last year.
Another ugly protest in Sydney last night.
Which, along with a caravan bomb hoax, helped make the case for
laws designed to stop people from harassing other people or intimidating other people from recognising their religion and worshipping at religious buildings.
Contrary to what we believe were intentionally misleading claims in the press and misleading statements from the Premier, that protest had nothing to do with religious worship. It took place on a Wednesday night, after official closing time, and was all about
the 100th anniversary of the Technion University in Haifa.
That's Alex Ribchin, co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, or ECAJ, talking about a small but absolutely superlative science and technology polytechnic located in Israel. It's much smaller than an MIT or Stanford, for example, but punches well above its weight in terms of intellectual output and the quality of its research. However, like both MIT and Stanford, the Technion has deep ties with the military and deep expertise in military technologies like cyber warfare, encryption, control systems, robotics, and the military applications of AI. For reasons I think we can all understand, that makes it controversial for many people at this particular moment. So you shouldn't be surprised to learn that some Australians, including Jewish Australians, found it objectionable to honor such an institution at a moment like this. Gathering on Castlereagh Street, 50 meters north of the entrance of the synagogue, that's half a football field, under the awning of the Cityside building. To be clear, whatever your opinion of the Technion, the war in Gaza, Israel, or anything else, those are the facts. We aren't getting anywhere unless we start with the facts. Unfortunately, this is how the story was told.
Yeah, they claim to be opposed to the Israeli government only, not Jews. Yet they targeted a synagogue, leaving Jewish Australians holed up inside.
What Mr. Kenny may not know, but most Sydneysiders who work in the CBD probably do, is that there are two entrances to the synagogue. There's the Castlereagh Street entrance, which, as we've noted, was 50 meters from the protesters, and there's the Elizabeth Street entrance, the grand entrance which faces Hyde Park, and where there is neither evidence nor even allegation of the presence of protesters. In addition to their beliefs that Australia should not be celebrating links with institutions like the Technion, they were also demanding wholesale changes to Australia's foreign policy in the Middle East and to its relationship with the State of Israel. Now, you may agree with them, you may disagree with them. You are welcome to criticize them for what they believe, what they are, what they said, and what they did, but not for what they didn't do.
There is a time and place, of course, for peaceful protest.
That's Alex Rivchin's partner as co-CEO of the ECAJ, Peter Wertheim, saying something we suspect would make sense to most Australians. But then he went on to say,
that was the wrong time and the wrong place.
That's an assertion that merits scrutiny, and it's too bad the journalist didn't have the curiosity to ask him to explain it. Because we think most Australians might say that 166 Castlereagh Street is a reasonable place to peacefully protest a clearly secular and political event held at 166 Castlereagh Street, even if that building happens to be a synagogue. And if the protesters themselves are actually kept 50 meters away, remember that's half a football field, at 155 Castlereagh Street, in front of the Cityside building, on the other side of the road, well, that might strike many Australians as pretty reasonable.
And there are all sorts of different functions that go on in a synagogue at any one time.
We've already established that. Nobody should be harassed or obstructed from religious observation, no matter what is going on inside the same building. Not only that, such harassment would be unlawful under laws that have existed for a very long time. Unfortunately, that does not appear to have been explained to the Premier before he rushed the most aggressive rollback of civil liberties in New South Wales history since the Second World War, because of what he told the people of New South Wales was an urgent need for
laws designed to stop people from harassing other people or intimidating other people from recognising their religion and worshipping at religious buildings.
We can now clearly say that the justification for that law has been thoroughly discredited. The bomb scare was a hoax. Many of the anti-Semitic attacks were the work of a foreign government, whether you believe that it was Iran or suspect it was someone else. So that leaves the supposed assault on the Great Synagogue, as well as two alleged assaults in Caulfield, which we think can best be understood with a helpful parable. The parable of the sons of Sobieski. Let's imagine for a moment that controversial right-wing politician Grzegorz Braun is invited to speak in an association of conservative Polish-Australian businessmen, whom we'll call, for argument's sake, the Marian Sons of Sobieski. For those who don't know, Mr. Braun is an alleged anti-Semite and Holocaust denier, but is also a popular politician on the right. Imagine the event held at what some might call the Cathedral of Polish Australia, Our Lady Częstochowa Church in Marian. Now let's say a group of left-wing Polish Australian university students who are part of an organization we'll call the Polish Pupils and Workers Collective, or PPWC for short, catches wind of the event. As you might imagine, they are not okay with it. The thing is, everyone hates the PPWC. They're one of those groups that's always showing up to complain about something. They show up at Our Lady Czestochowa, and the sons of Sobieski are not having it. It's enough for people to have to deal with them complaining about Australia Day or gay rights in the Catholic Church, but Marayong is their backyard, and this church, their temple. They had some nerve coming there.
This was a provocative move.
Shouts are exchanged, they turn into fisticuffs and scuffles. Who started it? Nobody knows. Depends who you talk to. And the police won't give a straight answer. The next day, however, the president of the Sons of Sobieski, scion of a family of billionaire property developers and Labour Party donation bundlers, who also happens to be great mates with a premier, as such people tend to be, calls him up and tells him everything that happened. Which is all confirmed, by the way, by all reports in the press.
This is just shocking stuff. This is barracking for terrorism.
And boy, the premier is livid. A few weeks later, he introduces laws in Parliament to ban such protests, describing them as
laws designed to stop people from harassing other people or intimidating other people from recognising their religion and worshipping at religious buildings.
Is that acceptable? Was the premise of the legislation, and indeed the inference about the PPWC, fair? Was it truthful? If the Premier really cared about the safety of Polish Catholics, should he not care that PPWC is an organization of Polish Catholics? Or is it enough to be assured by his mates in the Sons of Sobieski that the PPWC are fringe, unrepresentative, that everyone can't stand them? If he accepts that at face value, can he really claim to be acting out of concern for the Polish community? Or just for his mates? More importantly, should you care about any of this? You might say, I'm not Polish, I've never heard of Grzegorz Braun, the Sons of Sobieski, or the PPWC, doesn't concern me. Or you might say, actually I hate the PPWC too, because of that time their protests disrupted traffic, or the things they said on Australia Day, or about the Catholic Church, or whatever. So I'm happy to see them finally shut up. We suggest you should care, for two reasons. First, denying people's right to protest on what they consider false premises is a fantastic way, indeed a perfect way, to turn an annoying radical fringe into a dangerous radical fringe. Most Australians are too young to remember when dangerous radical movements were actually a thing even in Western democracies like the US, Germany, Italy, and Greece. And if you've ever worked in a country where you have to pass through metal detectors to get into prestigious office buildings, you'll know that shared consent of the social contract is something we should never take for granted. Even more importantly, if it's okay to be cavalier about the truth when talking about an unpopular, powerless group like the PPWC, why would anyone think they'd fare better if one day they too find themselves seen as an unpopular and powerless fringe? Life is cruel that way. The freedoms that protect the PPWC protect all of us. That's why this isn't really a parable about the Sons of Sobieski. It's a parable about the health of our democracy and society, and the behavior of people and leaders who work for us, all of us.
Laws designed to stop people from harassing other people or intimidating other people from recognising their religion and worshipping at religious buildings.
The thing is, we already have laws to do that, and have always had, going back to Federation. Police in Australia already have plenty of legal ammunition too.
Stop people from harassing other people or intimidating other people
at a synagogue, or a church, at a mosque, at the footy, on the metro, hell, even at a brothel. Everywhere. These powers already exist and have always existed. That's why in our society, which cherishes freedom of speech, until 2 months ago, there have only been 2 circumstances where our police are explicitly authorized to disregard freedom of speech and empowered to disperse protests, even lawful protests. Those were risks to safety and obstruction of traffic. That's it. For our entire history in Australia, we have restricted police from arbitrarily dispersing protests, except in those 2 situations. As of June 2025, however, thanks to a bomb scare which we now know was a hoax, anti-Semitic attacks which were the work of a foreign government, and the supposed assaults on synagogues like the one you just heard about, we have added to these circumstances a third, when the protest takes place an unspecified distance from a place of worship. The thing is, that means anywhere. Hyde Park, probably every public park in New South Wales, and certainly anywhere in the Sydney CBD. If you're a resident of New South Wales, did you know that? Did you know that your Labour government, under pressure from lobbyists, essentially made your right to protest contingent on the agreement and even whim of whatever constable happens to be on the scene? We respect the police as much as anyone at Neosis, and presume this power will be exercised with wisdom and discretion in most cases. But there are bad apples in every organization. You reckon these expanded powers, which fly in the face of Australian cultural and expectations, had anything to do with a flare of tempers that led some policeman to punch a small woman like Hannah Thomas the way he did? And that happened less than 3 weeks after these laws took effect.
And this is in Australia. I mean, we're not talking about some a dictatorship in overseas. We're talking about free and democratic Australia.
We share Mr. Wertheim's concern. In that clip, he's talking about freedom of religion and religious observance. But freedom of religion and freedom of speech are both fundamental Australian values. We aren't sure you can really have one without the other. What's more, we can't think of a single case in Australian history when someone was actually prevented from practicing their religion. That's the accident of our history, not a single one. And we don't believe Mr. Wertheim or the Premier himself can name one either. We've never heard of anyone in Australia who was sacked for practicing their religion, or had their performances cancelled, or honours revoked. Never. So there is irony in our government telling us that it has no choice but to restrict speech to protect freedom of religion. Let's return to our parable of the sons of Sobieski for a moment, because parables are sometimes helpful ways to think about the world. Freedom of speech probably doesn't matter to the sons of Sobieski. Why? Because their speech is always protected. They don't gather on sidewalks to shout into loudspeakers. They don't rally in parks. When they have something important to say, they whisper it directly into the ears of the powerful. In board meetings, one-on-one conversations in offices 50 stories in the sky, over dinner at political fundraisers, and the occasional shared drink at the chairman's lounge or club. So it's not their speech that is being restricted by these laws. It's ours. And when I say ours, I mean all of ours, whether Jewish or not, whether Zionist or not, whether pro-Israel or not. It's our speech that is being restricted. And when I say ours, I want to be absolutely clear who I'm talking about, because it's not about any particular race, religion, ethnicity, or national origin. It's not about progressives or conservatives. By all of us, I mean all of us who don't have the Premier's private number in our phone. All of us who have never sent a text to the chair of the ABC and can't imagine ever doing so. All of us who wouldn't ever imagine calling the editor of the newspaper or the CEO or the police commissioner and berate them for getting this or that point wrong. That's a lot of us, and it includes the vast majority of Australia's Jews. We've been told that these laws are about protecting Jewish Australians. But by Jewish Australians, the Premier clearly does not mean her, or them, or them.
Why don't they count as Jewish?
And if it's not for them, then we dare say, maybe it's not for you either, regardless of your religion.
There's absolutely no place for hate.
We all have the right to protest, but we need to protest peacefully.
That's it. I say to them, stay home and spend time with your kids.
That may or may not be good advice for Jews against the occupation, but it's not really these people's job to give it. Their job is to maintain public safety and protect our rights and freedoms, all of ours. That includes the freedom to decide for ourselves what we do on Father's Day. Thank you very much, Senator Lambie. We're also fairly confident that Senator Lambie would never dare say such a thing to Tassie workers on a picket line, for example, lecturing them on whether they should or shouldn't be there, and probably wouldn't sit silently and listen to one of her colleagues from another state do it either. If workers on a picket line in Tasmania got beaten up by private security guards, Senator Lambie would probably do minimum research to figure out exactly what happened before dismissively both sidesing the issue away. But the Australians on the beach at Bondi didn't merit such curiosity from the supposedly populist Senator Lambie. As usual, it was a teal, representative of those privileged, out-of-touch doctors' wives who spoke the most sense.
What do you make of these scenes playing out in your electorate yesterday?
Look, I was really saddened, I'll be honest, and I don't think anyone wants to see people shouting at each other on Bondi Beach.
Having said that, what's needed at this moment is more than just shared empathy. No doubt everyone appreciates Ms. Spender's empathy, but she's not there to be an emotional support blanket, nor to give advice on how to exercise our right to free speech. Ms. Spender's job as a Member of Parliament is to remind everyone about the law, ensure it is followed, ensure it is fit for purpose, keeps us safe, and most important, protects our liberties. Let me repeat that. Protects our liberties. All of our liberties. Zionist Australians and anti-Zionist Australians. White Australians and non-white Australians. If you're an Israel supporter who thinks that establishing the precedent of banning symbols and chants simply because some politically important group finds them offensive, if you think that can't ever come back to bite you, we'd encourage you to read up on your history. Finally, and most importantly, Ms. Spender, if public protest is the act of peaceable assembly to petition government for redress of grievances, which is an idea common across all English law and Western liberal political tradition, although in my opinion, the words of America's First Amendment expressed it best, if that's the job of protesters, whose job is it to do the redressing? Because in almost 2 years of nonstop protests, which are a pain in the backside for everybody, including the protesters you'd have to imagine, all of whom no doubt have better things to do on a weekend, that's the one question I don't think I've heard anyone in Australia ever ask. If the protesters are assembling to petition for redress of grievances, whose job is it to do the redress? And when are we going to hear from them about the grievances to be redressed?
So, Allegra, in addition to promoting IRA, you need to promote non-acceptance of Jerusalem definition.
I promise you, my fellow Australians, that if our elected leaders were half as responsive to public opinion as they clearly are to lobbyists,
so, Allegra,
there would probably never be another protest in Australia ever again. For anything. How does that sound for everybody?
In addition to promoting IRA, you need to promote non-acceptance of Jerusalem definition.
No disrespect to our antisemitism envoy, who I can attest is an impressive woman, but that's not the sound of democracy you are hearing in that little exchange. That's the sound of oligarchy. And that's why Australians haven't been as relaxed as we'd all wish them to be.
Everyone has the right to protest, but when it's hateful and provocative, let's call it out and not try to pretend that both sides are equally to blame.
Sure, call it out. Just remember that in a liberal democracy, people minding their own business are minding their own business. Whether that means surfing, jogging on the beach, wearing budgie smugglers, or lawfully protesting and exercising their right to free speech. In a liberal democracy, every one of those activities constitutes minding your own business. Some people think it's confronting to see people dressed like this on a beach. Some people think it's confronting to see people dressed like this on a beach. And disrespectful to the flag to boot. Doesn't matter. That's the beauty of living in a free society. It's none of your business. Shouting obscenities at someone, however, is not.
Terrorists!
Entering someone's personal space, chest puffed up, strutting like a cock in a chook pen, that's not minding your own business.
Go back to Lakemba.
These people have no right to claim Bondi is their backyard.
Draped in Israeli flags, yelled, "Go back to Western Sydney."
Don't come to Bondi.
They don't live here. I live here.
Not sure what that gentleman thinks that's supposed to mean.
They're terrorists. Get them out of here.
Holding a Palestine protest on the beach is so un-Australian.
As someone who chose to become Australian, I think I can confidently say that those are not what I understand to be Australian values.
The patriotic Aussies who are defending Bondi today are motivated by love.
Go back to Western Sydney. Go home.
Other people appeared to be yelling, "Off the beach, off the beach."
I know that Allegra Spender knows that.
What did you think about the behaviour of protesters who became involved in scuffles yesterday?
I know the vast majority of people there behaved well. You just need a couple of people to behave badly, and certainly some of the things that were said were pretty awful.
It was awful, especially considering these are some of the wealthiest and most privileged people in the world, who somehow were never taught that privilege is not the same as entitlement.
This paddle out, as far as we understand, was organised by a group called Jews Against the Occupation. Why should that group not protest at Bondi?
They're welcome to.
Have you explained that to your constituents, Ms. Spender?
You were saying you prefer that had been held somewhere else.
Yeah, I do.
Fair enough. Maybe some people prefer this bloke share a little less. Again, that's the beauty of Australia. We all know how to mind our own business. Why is this so hard?
Bondi belongs to everybody. However, by some it is seen as provocative. It makes it harder and provokes reactions which I just don't think really help anyone.
Is it really that hard, Ms. Spender? Once upon a time, I remember people calling that sort of thinking
the soft bigotry of low expectations.
What is the soft bigotry of low expectations?
Turns out that it's got nothing to do with race, or religion, or money, or IQ, or structural inequality, even though all those things often come into play. It turns out that some of the smartest, wealthiest, best educated, most successful, and privileged people in this world often suffer from a lifetime of low expectations. Low expectations for recognizing that they share this world with others, including those with whom they disagree. Low expectations for understanding that other people have fears and feelings and emotions too, and those are no less important than theirs.
We are not claiming Bondi Beach as ours. Australia is ours.
Low expectations in terms of understanding what a ridiculous thing that is for any group of Australians to say. That's Northern Beaches councillor, Liberal Party member, and Stand With Us head Michael Gencher, presumably the author of the original call-out for show force on Bondi Beach last Thursday. We don't know Mr. Gencher and don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, so perhaps that's not what he meant to say. Perhaps it just came out wrong. But it sure sounds to us like some people, at least, heard it the way you heard it.
Because the Bondi area is home to a large number of Australian Jewish communities.
Tell them to go. They're being provocative. You're allowed to be here, you're allowed to be here. They're disturbing the peace. They are, no. At the moment, you're disturbing the peace.
Mr. Kenny works for a network that works very hard to convince Australians like this young man here that their fellow Australians are
terrorists.
Noisy and aggressive.
Despicable.
Cultural Marxists.
Pro-Hamas
Jihadists.
turning their back on civilization.
Poorly integrated migrants.
Flirting with ideas of barbarism.
Shit Jew.
On the side of the rapists and the torturers and the killers and the kidnappers.
Whole bunch of lowlives who need to get jobs. It's a reality.
Surely that has something to do with the chaotic scenes we saw on TV?
There's no role for political violence in Australia or on Sydney streets. The police will take it incredibly seriously. I know that they're launching an investigation into the punches that were thrown on the weekend, and frankly, I hope they throw the book at the people that started it.
We understand that sentiment, Premier, but suspect it won't happen, given what we know about the socioeconomic profile of the people who live in Bondi, which is why we made this video. Not because we want to see people thrown in jail, but because we think it's time we Australians had some honest, old-fashioned self-reflection, and maybe even some tough love and honest talk about what Australian values mean in this context. Because
no child should be segregated by low expectations.
Most importantly, we need to stop telling lies about each other. We need to stop indulging Australians who tell lies about fellow Australians, simply because that's easier than engaging in the substance of their arguments.
We are never going to win the hearts and minds of anti-Semites because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds.
We're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds.
We can arrest them, we can deport them, and we can cut off their funding.
We can deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding.
In the US, many pro-Israel voices have given up on the marketplace of ideas, placing their faith instead on their ability to influence the government to repress speech. A strategy that we think will be tragic for America, tragic for Israel, and tragic for many American Jews. which is why we think it's so concerning that some Australians, including our anti-Semitism envoy it seems, would like to emulate that strategy here.
If someone gets up and says something terrible about Israel, terrible, that without a very big stick perhaps in terms of funding, that, anyone's really going to do much about it on campus.
That's Arnold Bloch-Liebler partner and now former Zionist Federation of Australia, or ZFA, President Philip Chester, making the case, or to be fair to him in that specific clip, inquiring about the case.
The idea, for example, of taking funding away from institutions or universities that everybody's going to get very excited about.
For exactly the kind of big stick anti-Semitism envoy Gillian Siegel argues, in her proposed national anti-Semitism strategy, that she or someone like her needs, even as we are assured that no one would ever actually use it.
I don't think it'll ever get to that point.
The objective here is that you don't end up in that world.
I think really it's our job to fight for that.
We disagree. Dismissal is always easier than discourse, but it's only discourse that can bring people together and change what people believe. We need better discourse in this country. As much as politicians want it to be so, we are not going to get cohesion by getting people to shut up in this country.
I think it's about time that we just cracked down on this and said, look, enough.
That never works. If we want more cohesion in this country, we need more and better discourse. Unfortunately,
the discourse of anti-Semitism has been completely perverted by the need to find a way of delegitimizing and censoring people who are critical of Israel or even critical of Zionism, because you don't have good arguments.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying...
That's Peter Beinart, professor, journalist, scholar, and critic of modern Judaism and Zionism. He's a highly influential and polarizing figure inside the Jewish American community, making a critique of anti-Semitism discourse which turns out to have been validated by his ideological opposite.
Our job is not to make you look good, American Jews. Your job is to make us look good.
Harvard emeritus professor Ruth Weiss, who is equally polarizing and influential. She's not only emeritus professor at Harvard, where she held an endowed chair, she is also a National Humanities Medalist, an honor which puts her in the company of the most important pillars of American culture and society. There's only one such medal awarded every year. Even in Australia, a search on her name in the ABC's website garnered 88 hits.
Don't let the war of words ever be fought about Israel's nature. Let it be fought about why you can't accept Israel.
The Anti-Defamation League knows that if it's trying to defend the military court system in the West Bank, they've already lost.
What's worse, there are those who contend that the kind of motivated reasoning and instrumentalized rhetoric advocated by people like Professor Weiss is an invitation to, if not a slippery slope toward, mendacity.
They don't care about whether it's true or not.
That's political scientist and Professor Norman Finkelstein, who, as you probably guess, is also highly influential and highly polarizing, inside and outside the Jewish community, in America and around the world.
Because if it serves the cause, it's true.
And to be clear, nothing that Professor Weiss says in the video we share, nor in anything we know she has ever said or written, is an encouragement to mendacity.
Any discussion of what life is actually like for Palestinians on the ground, you've already lost the conversation.
Turn the subject to the accusers, not to the accused.
So the move is always to basically turn attention away from what's actually happening to Palestinians on the ground and turn it into a question about the motivations of the person who is making the criticism.
Teach them how to defend by attacking.
Mr. Finkelstein's contention, however, is that the ideological fervor, which is so obvious in clips like these, leads many people to that.
I know that mentality.
You have to know that that's the goal. You have to expose these people. You cannot allow them into a big tent.
If it serves the cause, even if it's not true, it's true.
Well, first of all, Professor, thank you for these words of wisdom, which 30 years ago would sound mainstream, but nowadays it's a bravery to say them.
And before you let anyone gaslight you into thinking that even talking about this is somehow an anti-Semitic, what's the word?
Trope, they call it. I hate that word. It's just a stupid word.
Yes, that's it. It's not a trope, because it has nothing to do with Semitism, or Zionism, or Israel. It's just propaganda. It's how propaganda works. We as citizens just need to do a better job of spotting it. Because it does work. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason it's done. And there's a reason your politicians do it. What have we been arguing about this last week? Australia's relationship with Israel? Or whether Arabs on the beach is somehow
highly provocative?
For over 80 weeks, protest after protest. Have you heard a single discussion in the news, even on the ABC, about what protesters actually demand and the pros and cons for Australia of each of those demands?
It's completely unnecessary.
About the consequences for Australia?
And regular Australians.
For the safety of Australians? Of continuing with the default settings of our foreign policy? And with flamboyant alignment with the policies of a country with whom we barely trade in a conflict that has
nothing to do with our nation. We should draw a line under this and just walk away from this altogether. I'm sick of it.
Given that we know we are entering a world in which international power will no longer be concentrated in the US, Europe, and its allies,
American global leadership is over.
Is anyone talking about the long-term consequences for Australia?
And regular Australians.
Living in a world surrounded by 2 billion Muslims, going on 3, of what it will be like for Australians 20 years from now, being remembered as one of the nations that stood squarely on the side of whatever it is the world comes to decide to call what we are doing to Gaza.
The majority of them have problems with Jews right now, which is terrifying to me.
The United States is effectively complicit in a genocide.
They say, Israel is committing genocide against Palestine. You're like, no, it's not.
Are those not the exact questions a real Australian patriot would be asking at this moment?
As many have pointed out, there were no Australian flags flown by the pro-Palestinians.
Where's your Aussie flag? Where's your Aussie flag?
I appreciate people waving Australian flags.
They even sang the Australian national anthem.
Even better. Who doesn't love the Australian national anthem? But if we had to choose, wouldn't we rather people show their patriotism by insisting that Australian foreign policy be directed by the Australian national interest? And that to do that, we actually need to discuss what is or isn't the Australian national interest? I'm not saying we at Neosis have the answers to these questions. We are saying it's a problem that the questions aren't even being asked, because we're stuck. Stuck on the question of whether these protesters even have a right to be there.
The pro-Palestine movement is a Trojan horse for radicalism.
Or whether their voice even has a place in the discussion.
They're going to go around pretending that they have some legitimacy in this argument.
And all it does is spread hatred and division.
We all need to start having better discussions and debates. And to do that, we need to start by making a habit of calling out stories that don't pass the sniff test.
Jewish Australians were barricaded inside Sydney's Great Synagogue last night.
They were forced into lockdown.
And forced it actually into lockdown.
Just think about that. Our fellow Australians were unable to safely leave their place of worship.
Forcing people to lock down inside a synagogue.
Socrates would ask questions.
No matter how impressive the storyteller may be.
They were barricaded inside the synagogue and they were advised by police that it wasn't safe for them to leave.
That's Alex Ribchin again.
Forcing it into lockdown, making Jews feel unsafe in their own place of worship.
It was ugly, it was uncalled for, and for Jews in the synagogue, it must have been terrifying.
Lending his own personal credibility, and we might even say the gravitas of his station, to the narrative being told by Sky News.
We've seen over the last 14 months and in countries around the world what these mobs can do when properly aggravated and incited. It's a dangerous situation, and that's why the police were so keen to remove the one Jewish individual. We look at that as a case of bizarre policing, the fact they targeted the Jew rather than the mob that threatened him. But ultimately, they were concerned for his safety, and it was easier to remove him. But it shows the menace and the harm posed by these mobs, and that's why for 3 hours, the people inside couldn't leave and go about their lives. And the fact that you have people in this country in this time barricaded inside synagogues, unable to go about their lives at the mercy of mobs, it's shameful.
Yeah, it's absolutely outrageous. Speaking of outrageous, I want to turn to today's shocking news with Amnesty International accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
Which brings us back to Ms. Spender's most substantive criticism of not just the Bondi protests, but all protests over the past 2 years.
These sorts of events don't bring us any closer to that at all.
Which is that nothing has changed and the protests don't seem to be doing anything.
Are we better off today than we were yesterday?
For all their protesting, government policy has barely changed. If our democracy is stuck at a spinning beach ball, and we're all getting sick and tired of seeing it keep spinning, at what point do we ask, where exactly has the blockage occurred? That doesn't mean we need to do exactly as this crowd says. We aren't arguing for mob rule. But in a democracy, when the majority of Australians and overwhelming majority of voters of the governing party want to see material changes to Australian foreign policy, somehow hearing our leaders say stuff like,
there is deep hurt on both sides. We need to heal the hurt.
Just doesn't cut it. I wonder if anyone in Premier Allen's team understood how patronizing that sounded to so many Victorians when she said that. As if protesters are just emo kids seeking some attention and love.
The overwhelming bulk of people in this country want communities to be able to get along because that's what builds a great country of ours.
Actually, Mr. Husick, protesters are marching because they have grievances about Australian government policy.
When this war is over and every photographer in the world and journalist crawls over Gaza and you really see the Dresden-esque impact there.
People look at this and they see a state that is both vulnerable and genocidal.
I think it's going to be a bad day for Israel and a bad day for world Jewry.
No, this will be the new Judaism and maybe the only Judaism.
Perhaps they don't want their Australian children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren to live in the world that is coming, associated with countries which will be remembered as having been complicit with whatever you want to call this thing we are doing to Gaza.
One student tells me, for me as a liberal Jew, it will be better if Israel doesn't exist.
My grandchildren will grow up in a world where they will learn what it is to be Jewish in a world where the Jewish state is a pariah state.
Then I am not responsible for all these awful crimes.
A world where more than 90% of humans on this planet are not white Europeans, where most of the world's economic, military, and cultural power will be in non-Western hands.
All colonized people see themselves in Palestine.
And where people will absolutely remember what happened in Gaza, whatever it is we end up calling it.
And all colonizers see themselves in Israel.
There are probably 4 billion people in the world today under 30. Their brain chemistry is being rewired, or will soon be rewired, by the images coming out of Gaza. Many will live to the end of the century, decades after many serious people believe the Jewish state may no longer even exist.
Israel is unsustainable.
I think Zionism will be looked upon by Jewish history as one of the greatest disasters in Jewish history.
There's no coming back from this. Something new needs to be created.
The images coming out of Gaza will be with us long after that.
That is not a clever place to find yourself.
The Israelis have made their bed. They will lie in it. Americans, Brits, and Germans have done so too. When did we ever vote to join them? What would be so awful about a policy towards Israel that looks more like Mexico's?
This morning, Mexico electing the first woman president and first Jewish president in its 200-year history.
Whose Jewish president has already recognized Palestine, officially referred Israel to the ICC, which is what led to the arrest warrants of Mr. Netanyahu, joined South Africa's case against Israel at the ICJ, and condemned both October 7th and Israel's response in equal terms, using language that would not be out of place in a speech by an Australian Green.
Claudia Sheinbaum, quien condenó los actos violentos que se han registrado en este conflicto entre Israel y Palestina.
Yo estoy de acuerdo con los posicionamientos que hizo el gobierno de México. Desde el primer momento.
And more importantly, has spoken frankly about war crimes against civilians.
Por supuesto que hay que condenar cualquier forma de violencia y particularmente pues esta forma de violencia, atacar a civiles inocentes.
And condemn them in equal measure, no matter who commits them. Look at this face. Does this look like the face of a woman terrified that some lobbyist will accuse her of
creating a moral
impression of equivalence?
put them on the same page as if there is some equivalence there.
Hamas and Israel in the same category.
A sense of equivalence there.
A really obscene moral equivalent.
In any case, contrary to the fears of many Australian pundits, that there will be disastrous consequences for any ally pursuing anything less than totally slavish fidelity to U.S. direction.
I spoke with the president of Mexico, very nice woman, very fine woman, and it's not often that I feel I've learned something from a phone call.
Mexico's president reminds us that Americans actually like allies who stand up for and respect themselves. Because while lapdogs are easier to deal with than bulldogs, in the end, nobody wants to be allies with a lapdog. Oh, and while we're at it,
do you like apples?
Mexico has also done a better job than most countries at restraining the rise of antisemitism.
How do you like them apples?
And if you're one of the many Australians saying,
people are sick of it.
I'm absolutely sick of this. I'm sick of this.
I'm getting really sick and tired.
I'm absolutely sick of it. I don't want to see it anymore. And
pro-Gaza protesters have taken it too far. We've had over 60, I think, now every week in Melbourne.
That's it. I say to them, stay home and spend time with your kids.
It makes life difficult. I mean, I was a few weeks out trying to drop my daughter off somewhere on a Sunday. Oh, I couldn't get there because there was yet another protest on.
And asking, when will it stop? The answer is, it will stop when those grievances are redressed, or at the very least, addressed, acknowledged. When our democratic leaders make a habit of speaking of them as something other than the concerns of street urchins.
And I'm firmly of the view that if the guns can go silent in Gaza, then it's time to bring peace, not division, to our street.
Again, tone-deaf, dismissive, and totally insulting. Now, you are absolutely entitled to disagree with protesters and have your own view about what Australia's foreign policy should be. You might even, should you choose to be so adventurous, argue your case in the marketplace of ideas. But that requires engaging with those ideas, not simply dismissing those who disagree with you as racists, while strong-arming pliant political leaders into outlawing arguments that you are unable to beat.
That's really suboptimal.
You can argue about that.
Yeah, you can argue about that.
That without a very big stick, perhaps, in terms of funding,
we need to all put away our sticks, physical and metaphorical. And while things may be changing, it took way too long for leaders in our so-called democracy to even recognize where ordinary Australians even are.
Firstly, it was a massive crowd.
And was an opportunity for people to express their concern about what is happening in Gaza.
Over 100,000 people. And if the weather wasn't appalling, I think it would have even been maybe even double the size.
I think this is a moment, a sort of wake-up call for Australian politics.
There's no doubt there was a massive community demonstration, huge.
There was a lot of Middle Australia there, and I think that's something that can't be ignored.
It's not surprising that so many Australians have been
concerned about the situation in Gaza and had incredible empathy and concern about Palestinian children in particular, but the entire situation.
We at Neosis still cannot get over how shell-shocked both the PM and Premier Minns seem to be after the Sydney Harbour Bridge March. And many Australians are still in denial.
Them who think they're there for a cause of peace, when fully they're not. They're being manipulated. That's what's disappointing.
Manipulated by who, Alex? Because we're talking about 90,000 people there. How many of them do you think have been manipulated?
Imagine where social cohesion in Australia would be today if our leaders spent less time in the chairman's lounge and more time speaking to ordinary Australians. They might have learned 18 months ago that while there has always been overwhelming support for Israel's right to defend itself, to seek justice for the victims of October 7th, and of course to seek the release of the hostages, that support never extended to collective punishment, ethnic cleansing, and mass starvation. Not today, and not on October 10th, 2023, when our foreign minister was asked this.
The Israeli Defense Minister has ordered the complete siege of Gaza, the cutting off of food, fuel, and electricity. Do you think that level of response is justified?
Israel has a right to defend itself.
That wasn't the question, so Patricia Karvelas tried again.
Does that right to defend itself extend to what looks like collective punishment?
I think it's always very difficult from over here to make judgments.
No, it's not. It's not difficult at all to answer basic questions of English comprehension. A yes-no question about the text of the Geneva Convention, which any Australian can look up for themselves. We're divided on many things in Australia, including on Israel-Palestine. Should we expel the ambassador, as some believe, or is that going too far with a country that is so important to our long-standing allies? Should we put a stop to all weapons exports, or should we continue to make exceptions where we have pre-existing commitments as members of the F-35 consortium? Is the war in Gaza just an unfortunate example of an urban conflict that may be ill-disciplined and out of control? Is it a giant war crime, a crime against humanity, or does it actually meet the legal definition of the G word, as increasing numbers of people seem to believe? Reasonable people can disagree on questions like these, but no reasonable Australian can disagree with the premise that our leaders shouldn't lie to us, that they shouldn't try to be cute or clever with us just to make some lobbyist happy, by, for example, surprising us with the fact that they believe there are non-lethal parts to a fighter jet. Australians don't like feeling like we've been outsmarted by the folks who are supposed to work for us. Most importantly, if someone representing us on the world stage is asked a basic question about international law, they should answer it as one would expect an Australian to answer. Plain-spoken, honest, truthful, and fearless, even in the face of royal or imperial or any other authority, the way Banjo Patterson or Henry Lawson would have answered it. That's the Australian way as this immigrant understands it.
I think it's always very difficult from over here to make judgments.
Not that way. That way is the answer you'd expect from a paper pusher in Whitehall, or a shuffling mandarin in the imperial court. That's not an answer worthy of Australia. We believe Penny Wong is better than that, and we suspect Penny Wong knows that too. We are not nearly as divided as our news media want us to believe. There are important conversations we need to be having in Australia, especially now at this inflection point in our history and in the world's history. That's a conversation that requires leadership, the kind of leaders who have enough personal dignity, enough self-respect, and enough personal composure to never allow themselves to be bullied into indulging someone else's propaganda. Such as, for example, propaganda about protesters and protests.
It was a good idea blocking Flinders Street last night. A lot of people trying to get away from work and go away on holiday.
People always find such things threatening, confronting, and if not that, then sometimes just plain annoying. It's always been that way. And there have always been reasons one could find to criticize protests if one wanted to, even when they agreed with their objectives, such as during Black Lives Matter. If they disagreed with them, well, finding criticisms is easy peasy. Take the American Civil Rights Movement. By now, we all recognize it as having been on the right side of history. And we all believe that we are the kind of people who would have supported it if we were in a position to do so back then. Every single one of us believes that about themselves.
Precious Lord, take my hand.
It's just that contrary to the story sometimes told in those black and white historical documentaries about the movement, the civil rights movement wasn't just holding hands and singing songs. It was plenty messy, and not always nonviolent. For every Martin and Jesse and Andrew, there was a Malcolm, a Huey, a Bobby Seale, and a very scary Black Panther Party. There was Louis Farrakhan and Stokely Carmichael. But can you imagine what American history would have been if white America insisted that the only thing worth talking about was the chaos, the disruption, and the need for order and peace in the streets?
I certainly hope and have consistently called for a lowering of the temperature here.
There is deep hurt on both sides.
Can you imagine if white America had insisted that there was nothing to talk about until the movement reconciled its divisions?
We do not need to be having our social fabric torn apart by hate.
We need to heal the hurt.
Why did its more objectionable elements?
As political leaders, we have a responsibility to lower temperature, not to fuel division.
It's time to bring peace, not division, to our street.
And stop doing anything wrong before engaging with the substance of its arguments.
There is a simple solution to that. Listen to the people who voted you in.
if we insisted that civil rights must wait until the black community resolved its internal conflicts, or until all those brutalized by Jim Crow started acting like the perfect victims we wanted them to be. If we did that, we'd still be waiting today. And American race relations, as fraught as they were, would have been incomparably worse. Instead of South Central Los Angeles, it might have felt like Belfast. That's why the space for peaceful protest, no matter how annoying and pointless it may seem to be at the time, is such a crucial part of our Anglo-Saxon political tradition, giving everyone the avenue to express grievances in our multicultural, but still far from just, society.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand.
Our Prime Minister claims to understand this, boasting about his personal history of activism. These pictures are from his student days in 1983, standing next to a bullhorn. Yet that was a long time ago, for all of us. For that reason, we at Neosis thought that maybe all of us could use a little refresher on what civic protest has always been about.
We've seen young kids.
The idea of it being a children's crusade is a dramatic way to look at it.
At Sydney University, being taught and encouraged.
The young people will start marching and bring Birmingham to its knees.
A walkout is such a great way to bring disruption and to bring attention to the issue.
To chant slogans of which there could be no comprehension as to what they mean.
If kids in Gaza are old enough to get bombed, then I'm old enough to understand what's really happening.
You know, you set up a tent to send a message to the Israeli government.
But perhaps the best-known divestment campaign was during the 1970s and 80s, when activists compelled universities to cut ties to South Africa.
About Gaza, how is that got any prospect of advancing a cause?
Really that children's crusade that really turned the tide.
And what we're seeing is an intellectual engagement or discourse.
You're not learning any of it at school. It's not even getting mentioned at school.
What we're seeing is a promotion of simplistic slogans and in some cases a promotion of hate. And there is no place for that whatsoever.
And so your words are very strong on what is happening there, but we need to go to the next step to ensure that, again, it's a safe space, Prime Minister.
It does need to be a safe space.
I've never felt unsafe at these rallies, and I stand in solidarity with them that occupation is not a Jewish value.
I don't believe it. I know you don't believe it. I'm not complaining. I'm not copying a plea. It's not a special plea. I'm trying to make you see something.
While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night.
They say, Israel is committing genocide against Palestine. You're like, no, it's not.
The invocation of Amalek by Mr. Netanyahu, the claim by President Herzog that there are no civilians in Gaza.
Genocide is something different.
The order issued by Defense Minister Gallant, no food, water, fuel, or electricity will be admitted to Gaza.
You could say there's civilian casualties in some ways that the war is being promulgated. That's really suboptimal.
That was an outright genocidal plan.
When there is a war, it doesn't matter who your enemy is. You need to destroy their offspring to prevent them from creating more offspring.
That's really suboptimal.
You can argue about this.
Yeah, you can argue about that, but it's not genocide.
Israel is in a war against Hamas, not the Palestinian people. And it's a real tragedy that so many innocent lives have been lost.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is not at war with Yahya Sinwar. He is not at war with Hamas. Israel is at war with the Palestinian people.
Do you regret being so vocal about not having the protest on the bridge?
No, I don't. I mean, again, it's a tricky one.
It's a mousetrap. You have these famished, starving people. You promise them a little cheese. They're like the showers in Auschwitz. You promise them a little cheese. And then when you get there, the Israeli army shoots them. Gleefully. You know, people don't want to hear that.
Can't help but think, it's nice to know.
Had this thought somewhere in the back of the mind and always told themselves, you cannot say that.
You're dancing in a concert while hundreds of thousands of Gazans are, homeless.
It's done with this kind of sadistic glee.
Makes it even better. Yeah. More enjoyable concert.
It would require a novelist.
If only they put the live video footage of Gaza.
The moment it came out of the mouth of the US president, yes, we can do that.
To capture the sadism of this.
If you weren't Premier, would you have marched?
Look, I mean, that's a fair question. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I can't find the word monstrous, pathological. It's very hard to capture it.
That's what people don't understand. Look, I know that you guys might be appalled by this, some of the listeners.
The support for these kinds of things, I don't know the exact numbers.
But seriously, this is how Israelis feel. People enjoy knowing that they are suffering.
I think it's always very difficult from over here to make judgments.
Silence is complicity.